All right, I think we might get started. I think our participants are all in our opening session. Welcome to our Social Brain Toolkit information session. We're very pleased and proud to be able to present some information about a very new and exciting resource that our team has developed. My name is Professor Leanne Torr. I'm a professor at the University of Sydney in the speech pathology discipline, and I'm presenting today together with some amazing people from our team, both from the University of Sydney and also University of Technology Sydney. And we have numerous people involved, which you will hear about a little bit later today. I'd like to start out firstly by acknowledging the tradition of custodianship and the law of country on which the University of Sydney and the University of Technology Sydney campuses stand. We pay our respects to those who have cared and continue to care for our country. So why did we develop this Social Brain Toolkit? Well, it came from a range of perspectives that we had come across over the years. We've been working on developing training programs for families, carers, friends, community agencies, for 15 years, I was reminded of yesterday, over 15 years. And why do we develop training for families, friends and carers and for the person with brain injury? Well, here's an example of a person with brain injury who said that communication can be frustrating for him. So the way, my father explains himself to me, it's not a clear view for me to understand. It's harder for me to understand that. And sometimes I get frustrated because I don't know what he's trying to say. So, that's clearly going to lead into communication breakdown for that person. So people with brain injury can experience a lot of difficulties after the injury in communicating with their families. Another aspect of what we're going to be talking about today is engaging with social media, being able to stay connected via social media. And this was another area that we could see was relatively not addressed. There aren't many training programs around, even though, as this speech pathologist pointed out, social media can be a really good way to reconnect with pre-injury friends and family. It can give a sense of still feeling engaged and keeping up with what's happening in their social world. So this was another area that we thought we would like to focus on. And Dr. Melissa Brunner, who's on this call, she's going to talk to us a bit later about a project within the Social Brain Toolkit that you can access today to help learn about how to use social media safely. We've also had feedback from people with brain injury about the need for online programs, that they don't really want to go back into the brain injury unit or back into the hospital, that they'd like to be able to have access to treatment and to services and education online. So this mother of a young man with brain injury said, if we could have the online toolkit, there's less travelling, there will be less cost involved. For my son, travelling is a big problem because we need to hire a taxi with wheelchair access. And for a 1-hour session, it may take us a whole day with a lot of money to pay. So having online programs negates the need for the travel that this family were having to deal with. And finally, we've heard from people saying that they can see that there is a need for programs that they can do on their own. So not having to have the clinician there, but they want to be able to be empowered and drive their own rehabilitation recovery. So this person with acquired brain injury said, when I left hospital, I waited a very long time to start rehab. So something like this would have been amazing for me to kind of fill the gap between leaving hospital and starting in a physical rehab process. So this Social Brain Toolkit is all online. So we've heard that, and this is something that why we've built this particular way of accessing training and education. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to introduce Dr. Rachel Riedake, who has been our project manager on this project, and she will continue to explain to you about the Social Brain Toolkit. So over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Leanne. So the Social Brain Toolkit project has been something that our team has been working on for 2.5 years now. And it's been a collaboration between the University of Sydney, the University of Technology Sydney, Brain Injury Australia, and our technology partner, Changineers. And alongside that, we have been incredibly grateful for the funding support that this project received through iCare New South Wales. And this funding from iCare New South Wales has supported the development of the 3 tools, the 3 programs that are part of the Social Brain Toolkit that we'll be introducing you to today. So we've had a large team of contributors who've had input into the development of the Social Brain Toolkit, and some of those people will be presenting here to you today. But there are many other people who've been working behind the scenes across Sydney Uni, across UTS, Brain Injury Australia, and Changineers, who all formed part of our project team. And we'd like to thank and acknowledge those people who are mentioned on this slide. I also wanted to thank our project advisory committee who we've been meeting with throughout the project. And those people have been advising us and contributing to the project's success. I'd also like to thank Westmead Brain Injury Unit and Royal Rehab, who supported the project in terms of helping us find participants, find people with brain injury who were interested in getting involved with what we were doing. And I also want to thank our team of speech pathologists who supported us and worked with us as part of our pilot research and really contributed their clinical expertise. And the final group of people that our team would very much like to thank are the many people with a brain injury, their family members, their rehabilitation clinicians who have been involved with our research at all of the stages throughout the project. We'd like to thank these people for contributing their perspectives as we planned what we were developing, for being willing to try out some new things with us and tell us what they think. And we would not have been able to develop the toolkit without the contributions of all of these people. So here you can see the phases of the Social Brain Toolkit project. So we started with what we call a collaborative design phase. And what that means is that we asked for input from people with a brain injury, from their family members, from clinicians, to help us work out how to develop and to design these tools. We then moved into a build phase where we worked with our technology partner to develop prototypes of the tools. We then moved into a pilot phase, and what that means is that we asked just a few people to try out the programs to tell us what they thought, and so that we could have a sort of initial look at how well these programs worked. And the final stage in the project was an implementation phase, and that meant we made the tools available and we collected data on how they were being used. So the end result of all this has been the development of 3 new programs which together form the Social Brain Toolkit. So we have Conversability, which is a program focused on having better conversations together after a brain injury. We have Social Ability, which is a self-guided program about using social media safely and successfully after a brain injury. And finally, we have Interactability, which is a self-guided program for family members, for friends, for professionals who work in brain injury, about giving those people some skills about how to interact more successfully with people who have a brain injury. So we'll be showing you today some of the features of each of these tools and sharing with you some of the findings that we've uncovered through our research. And next I'll hand over to Petra Avramovic, who is a PhD student in our team with us at the University of Sydney, and she'll be introducing you to some of the features of Conversability.
Thank you, Rachel. So as Rachel mentioned, I'll be talking you through the features of Conversability today. So Conversability is our online program for people with brain injury and their communication partners to improve their conversation skills together. So it consists of 10 sessions, and it's designed for the person with brain injury, a carer, which could be a family member, a friend or a support worker. It's done in conjunction with the speech pathologist, with the guide of the speech pathologist. It consists of 7 modules, which address 7 key messages. The first one being that we all have some problems with conversation. We can keep improving our conversations, match your conversation to the situation, work together to get the message across, talk like you were teammates, keep your conversations going, and make your conversations organised. So these key messages are addressed through 2 different ways. So each week, the clients would complete self-guided modules in their own time, and they would also meet once a week through virtual sessions with their speech pathologist. So for the speech pathologist, they do have session manuals and session resources ready to go. So let's have a look at some of those self-guided activities. Here is an example of a task, so where you can record practice conversations, and then these recordings are uploaded for the speech pathologist to watch and then give feedback on. Another example of some of the features you might see in the self-guided modules is short 1 to 2 minute videos or animations that might teach new ideas. So understanding communication after a brain injury. Some of the videos are actually interactive. So for example, in this case, you would watch the video, and every time the person with red hair speaks, you'd press the red hair button. Every time that the person with blonde hair speaks, you press the blonde hair button. In the end, you get a percentage to see how much each person talked for. There are also some activities where you might give a personal response, and then these answers are uploaded for the speech pathologist to see, and it can be something you can talk about in your session as well. Moving on to now the virtual sessions. In the platform, the booking requests are integrated into the platform. So you can request to book a session with your speech pathologist. And the video conferencing sessions are also integrated into the platform. So you can join into your virtual session through the platform. You can also access recordings of previous sessions through here as well. This is what the speech pathologist would see during the video conference session. And they have the ability to mark important moments in the video using this annotate feature, so it timestamps it. The speech pathologist can also write up notes for the clients to see after the session. And this is what the clients see as from a recording of the session. So they see a side-by-side view. They can see the amount of talking time that each person had. It's automatically calculated. They can see those time-stamped moments that were marked by the speech pathologist. So knowing exactly when you asked a really good question to keep the topic going. And they can also read the speech pathologist's notes. So I'll hand back over to Rachel now. We'll talk a little bit more about the research.
Thanks, Petra. So we've recently completed a study with Conversability where we asked 10 people with a brain injury to try out this program. So these people participated in the program alongside one of their usual communication partners. So that may have been one of their family members or one of their paid carers. So of the 10 people who started the program, we had 8 people complete the program in full. So one person did decide to stop the program due to some other stresses that were going on in their life at the time. And one other person decided to stop the program due to some frustrations with the technology. So Conversability involves setting goals for conversations at the start of the program. And how that works is that the person with a brain injury, their communication partner, and their speech pathologist work together at the start to come up with 3 goals for conversations. They also write some criteria for how they will know whether those goals have been achieved, and that's a process called goal attainment scaling. So for the 8 people who finished the program, 7 of the 8 of them did achieve their goals for conversations that they set at the start. At the end of the program, we also asked people to complete a survey. And one of the questions in the survey was whether conversibility improved people's knowledge about communication after brain injury. So for the 8 communication partners who finished the program, we had 7 of them report that conversibility had improved their knowledge about communication after brain injury. And we had 6 of the people with brain injury complete this survey, and 5 of the 6 of them also agreed that conversibility had improved their knowledge about communication. As part of that survey, we also asked people how easy it was to complete conversibility. So some people did say it was easy. We had 2 out of 8 communication partners and 2 out of 6 people with brain injury saying it was an easy program to complete, but most people did rate it in the middle of the scale, so telling us that it was neither easy nor hard. And what we've done, Melissa Meow from UTS has followed up on that and completed interviews with people at the end of the program to find out some more about the aspects that were difficult so that we can use that to guide our planning of future improvements to the website and the platform. So Petra and Melissa will both be continuing to analyse the data from this study in the coming months. And that will really help us to learn more about this program and the outcomes that it has for people. So I'll finish here with a quote that comes from a mother of a young son with a brain injury, young adult son with a brain injury who participated in the program. And I think this quote really sums up the impact the program had for her. So she says, "I'm trying to not ask so many questions, but express my feelings. And he's answering, express his feelings, explaining more details. Conversibility changed me first, dramatically, enormously. And because of me, I can now do much more for my son." So we're now planning how to make conversibility available more widely. So if you would like us to keep you informed about when and how you can gain access to conversibility, you can register your interest. So you can use your camera to scan the QR code you can see on this slide, and that will take you to a short form that you can fill in to let us know that you'd be interested in hearing more. You could also visit that website that you can see there and click the register your interest link under conversibility. So what we can confirm at this stage is that conversibility will be available through the University of Speech Pathology Clinic from early 2023. And so that will be one way that people with brain injury and their families can gain access to this program. We're also planning that conversibility will be made available to clinicians across Australia for them to be able to use it with their clients. Because there are costs with keeping this website up and running, there would be a fee associated with this. And so what we'll do is provide you with some more information about this once we are ready to launch to clinicians. We're also really keen to make conversibility available outside of Australia. And so if you are located internationally, we'd still really like to invite you to register your interest so that we can keep in touch with you. So we now have 2 more programs in the toolkit to introduce to you, and both of those are free to access. And so what I'll do now is hand you over to Dr. Liz Brunner from the University of Sydney to talk to you about the first of those programs, which is called Social Ability.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz, and I get to talk to you about Social Ability. And this is an online program that's designed for a person with a brain injury to work through themselves, to learn about using social media, connecting with other people, and staying safe. And so people can work through it on their own or with support from a family member, a support worker, or a clinician. And Social Ability has 4 modules in it. It's got what is social media, staying safe in social media, how do I use social media, and who can I connect with in social media. And in these modules, there's a combination of simple written information, like what you can see on the screen here. There's videos which explain different aspects of social media. There's questions for people to work through to think about how they like to use social media or who could help them. And there's also a printable worksheet that you can print out and write down and keep the messages of the 4 modules. And throughout the program, there are prompts to use the worksheet, like the one that is on the screen now. This is an example of one of the videos in the program, and it's out of the How Do I Use Social Media module. And it prompts people to think about how much time they spend using social media and provides some tips on making social media work for you. So I'll play a little bit of the video.
Time flies in social media. These days, many of us spend a lot of time online. Most Australians use more than one social media platform, and they use them every day. And many are using them more for school or work. That can add up to a lot of time spent on our devices. Social media platforms also send us notifications all the time, letting you know about new posts, likes, or comments. And you can spend lots of time just scrolling through your feeds to stay up to date. After a brain injury, spending time on social media can be even more important to be aware of. Spending heaps of time on social media can lead to even more brain fatigue and a feeling of being really overloaded or overwhelmed. It can also be hard to keep track of the time you spend on there. And that's when using social media can affect other parts of your life. Like if you spend too much time on it, you may not get other things done during your day, like rehab exercises, study, or work. If you're up late at night looking at a screen, it can then be hard to go to sleep. And then you're really tired the next day. Here's some simple tips so that you can take control and make social media work for you.
So I'll stop the video there, but it gives you a bit of a taste of some of the video content that's in the course and the program. And so people can work through the program at their own pace and in their own time. You can save your progress and come back to it later on, so you don't have to do it all at once. And once you complete all of the program, you can get a certificate at the end. We ran a pilot study with 5 people who had a brain injury, and we asked them to test the prototype of the program for us. And overall, they thought it was a really valuable resource, with one person commenting that the premise of the course was a really good thing. And another told us that it could be really helpful. As you can see here, I reckon to other people who had a brain injury like me, I really benefit so many things from it. And they gave us really brilliant feedback on what they thought worked in the program and also what they didn't think worked. And so we used their feedback to further refine the program before moving on to the next phase of testing, which was to ask a bigger group of people to do the social ability program and then also to practice their social media communication skills in a safe environment. And so in this study, people with brain injury were given access to the social ability program and encouraged to complete it. And they were also invited to join a closed Facebook group to practice their social media skills and communication with us. And so with the funding from iCare, we were able to employ a moderator from Brain Injury Australia, and they helped us run the first 2 groups in 2021. And people joined our Facebook group for 3 months. And this year, we've just finished our 3rd group, And this was the first group where we had 2 people who have a brain injury to join us as the group's moderators, and people joined this group for 2 months. We recruited 23 people across the 3 groups. So we had 7 people in the first group, 9 in the second, and 7 in the third group. Of those 23 people, 78% of them used the social ability program and 57% completed the program. So far, we've only analysed the outcomes for the first 2 Facebook groups. So in terms of social media skills though, after 3 months of being in the group, 9 out of the 16 people showed an increase in their knowledge of romance cyber scams, and 11 of them were able to give more specific advice about what they do in response to a cyber scam. At the end of the groups, 5 of the 16 participants showed an increase in knowing what hashtags actually were, and 7 people were actually able to suggest hashtags themselves. 3 months after the groups had finished, 15 people had maintained their knowledge of cyber scams and 13 had maintained their knowledge of hashtags. We didn't see any big changes in how often they used Facebook, but there were significant improvements in their confidence in using Facebook and their enjoyment of using it to connect with other people like themselves. The people in these first 2 groups recommended that others should totally give the program and the group a go. And across the 2 groups, 50% of them said that they found the group itself was very or extremely useful to them. We're pretty excited that Social Ability is now available for free on our website. And so you can access it by scanning this QR code or using the link on the screen. And we'll also put the link in the chat for you. Thanks very much. And I'll hand back over to Rachel.
Thanks, Liz. So I'll move on to sharing with you the final tool in the Social Brain Toolkit, which is called Interactability. So this is a free self-guided program, again online, for family members, friends and professionals about how to interact successfully with someone who's had a brain injury. So this self-guided online program uses a range of different activity types. So it includes videos, it includes quizzes and questions to reflect on. But one of my favourite parts of the program are the videos that feature people with a brain injury sharing their own advice about how to interact successfully with them. So we've included a range of individuals, including a person who has aphasia, so that means a loss of language skills after a stroke. We also have a person with dysarthria, which means she has unclear speech after an ABI. And another person who has a cognitive communication impairment, which means a difficulty with communication skills that's related to the difficulties with thinking skills that can come up for people after an ABI. So the program itself has 7 different modules which cover key topics about communicating successfully with someone who's had a brain injury. A person who's doing the program can do these modules in any order that they like, and it's not essential for people to do all of the modules. So that means depending on your interest, or perhaps if you're recommending it to someone else, you can let them know the parts that you think are most relevant to them. And we've catered to this by organising the modules around the different types of communication problems that can come up for people after ABI. So you can see here we have a specific module about interacting with someone who communicates without speech. We have a different module about interacting with someone who has difficulty with speaking or understanding. And finally, we have a module about interacting with someone who has difficulty with social communication after brain injury. Our aim with this program is for people to learn and to remember communication strategies. And one of the techniques that we've used to help with that is by introducing communication strategies using some metaphors to make them easier for people to remember. So you can see here in our tips for interacting with someone who has difficulty speaking or understanding that we've organised these strategies around the metaphor of passing a ball. So, for example, we're encouraging perhaps the family member to be ready to catch the person's message, to set up their own message to make it easy for the person with brain injury to catch, and to keep the conversation going by passing the ball backwards and forwards. And we have a few other metaphors that we've included in interactability, which you could discover for yourself if you're interested in signing up for Access and working through some of the activities. The picture you can see here is an example of one of our printable strategy summaries that people can download as part of the program. And you can see here as well that we've included some space for adding in specific tips that are relevant to an individual so that it can be customised for each person. So by organising the program into these short modules, this means that people can approach this by what we might call snackable learning. Each module takes about 20 minutes or so. If people do want to complete the program in full, this would take them about 2 hours in total. People can also track their learning. So the website keeps track of what steps you've completed so that you can log off and come back on a different day and pick up where you left off. And if people do choose to complete the program in full, they can access a certificate of completion at the end. So we'd like to invite you to take a look at interactability by using this QR code or this link. You might want to consider signing up for Access yourself or letting others know about it who may find it relevant. Next, I'll hand over to Melissa Miao from UTS, and she'll be sharing about how her PhD research influenced the development of interactability and sharing some of her preliminary findings as part of her research into the outcomes of interactability over the first year since we first made this program available to the public.
So interactability actually had design input directly from people with brain injury, their families and clinicians, and that resulted in a number of features to make it as easy to use as possible. This included a really simple user interface with accessibility options like captions on videos, adjustable font size and contrast for vision impairment, plain English throughout, really logical layout with short modules, and the ability to access it on any device. And for the over 300 people who were kind enough to give us feedback on the first version of it, 92% found it very easy or easy to use it on a computer or device. 85% found using the course very easy or easy overall, and 88% had no or little technological difficulty. Our users were also very satisfied, with 95% highly likely to recommend the course to others, and 92% finding the course overall extremely or very useful. They found it very educational, particularly the videos from people with brain injuries and their families, with great tips and advice, and the opportunity to see both good and bad conversational practice, and really appreciated the way the information was presented and that it helped their learning. They also reported that it was very emotionally impactful. We even had people with brain injury complete the course themselves and resonating with the video content. And even people who were clinicians found that the stories were very impactful. Lots of people described being very moved and inspired and really enjoying the course. We measured the effectiveness of it through both confidence and knowledge communicating with people with brain injury. So people's confidence communicating with people with brain injury went up after using interactability. So you can see there in the black before they did the test. Some people were not at all confident, but after, in the red, people became very confident and there was no one who had no confidence. We also looked at knowledge, and again, this one went all the way up from before interactability to after interactability. Some people got a perfect score, so they got all the questions right. So how can interactability be used? Here are some ideas of how people actually used it that might help you. So firstly, it can be used to help family and friends. So for example, some people who did conversability gave interactability to other members of their family so that they could all learn the strategies together. Sometimes the speech pathologist passed interactability on to families and friends and people with brain injury to complete by themselves. And then the speech pathologist just followed up with them if they needed any more help. And other times, the speech pathologist gave interactability to the whole friendship group of the person with brain injury so that they could work together and help each other remember the strategies. So we had one group of friends who actually remind each other all the time and practice together talking like a teammate, which is one of the strategies in both conversability and interactability. It's also really helpful for support workers, especially if there's lots of them. So for example, one person with brain injury had a whole big fat folder of a backlog of different strategies that they had been taught over the years, and it was too much for all the support workers to understand. So the speech pathologist got all the support workers to just log in and do the 2-hour interactability course, which they really liked. And together they have been working on hear, steer, and clear as a strategy, which has become a mantra in the home that they all use together. And even therapy assistants have told us that if they've never worked with someone with brain injury before, it suddenly gave them the confidence which they never thought they could have to work with someone with brain injury. Speech pathologists have also used it to help their whole multidisciplinary team, which includes other therapists, professional carers, and families or volunteers, to learn and improve their communication skills in a hospital. And also students who are learning to become speech pathologists or learning to become therapy assistants or social workers have been using it in Australia, Canada, the United States, and the UK. And of course, speech pathologists themselves doing the course have found that it helps them to improve their own professional development. But that was just the beginning. In the first year, we had 1,069 registrations from 29 countries. We can't wait to see where you take it next, and we hope to help you help more people in the future.
Thanks, Melissa. So next I'll hand over to Associate Professor Emma Power from UTS, who will open up a time of discussion and questions about what we've shared here about the Social Brain Toolkit.
Thank you all. Thanks for our presenters, and welcome to everyone. And if you have any questions, please, you can put them in the chat, and you can also raise your hand. And if any of the other team members see that, they can actually tell me. We did already have one question, and you know, in terms of that, from Sam. Hi, Sam. Nice to see you here. And you've talked about, you love the idea of the isolated exercises designed to teach practical skills, and wondering how much other information is provided to help people understand that. And so it's probably important to remind us that Conversability is a speech pathologist-led training program. So these materials in here are the tools, but the most important tool is the brain of the speech pathologist as a clinical expert. And so what they'll do is they'll look at the goals that the person's working on, and all of the information here is tailored through that process to their specific needs. For example, some people with brain injury have talked to me about, I know I have to shut up sometimes, or I know people want me to talk more. And so in relation to something like that picture about who's talking most, the conversation will be tailored to that discussion for that individual in that way. And that way you can actually get a more tailored approach. And not every single thing is always fully 100% relevant, but it's about the discussions, I think, around it. Does that make sense, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Emma. Can I also just follow up on that?
Sure.
I guess I was initially I couldn't really differentiate between interactability and conversability, but I think that you've really highlighted what the difference is there. Is that one is a tool to supplement the speech, the clinician's role, and the other is something that can be self-directed. Is that accurate?
That's definitely correct. And the other difference is that one of them will take at least 10 hours and maybe more of clinician time, whereas the other one is self-directed and it will not take any of the clinician's time directly, although the clinicians might want to facilitate and watch some of it with someone as well. But generally, we're talking about the difference between a 2-hour short program that you do yourself for interactability, to prove interactions, but to improve specific conversations that individuals have with their loved ones. That one is much more involved and speech pathologist led. So you've got two tools in the suite here. We sometimes need different ways of saying similar information with different intensities. So we've got one that's much more intensive and another one that you can do by yourself and is shorter. Thanks, Sam. It's a great question.
Can I just add in something there as well, just to make it really clear? So the interactability program, we've built that so that people with brain injury can do it themselves, obviously. When we've had people with aphasia, with traumatic brain injury, with because it's acquired brain injury, so it takes in all different kinds of brain injury. So their families, but also we're keen for case managers and carers and people who may be faced with the idea that they're working with someone with a brain injury, but they don't feel well equipped. They don't understand the communication problems that are happening, and they're feeling like they'd just like a bit more guidance about how to help this person communicate effectively. And so we've built this with that group in mind. And then the other group that we're finding are using it are students. So social work students, speech pathology students, they're going out on their first placement to a neuro placement, and they might have done the lectures, but they still don't feel completely confident with how to interact. So it's really targeted at lots of different groups, people in the community. It might be police officers who end up doing this training, or people who are interacting with the public. But might like, a lot of the strategies that we talk about help all of us communicate more effectively, right? It's kind of those universal principles of improving communication. So I think we've built it so that it has wide appeal and can be used by a wide range of people, and we've been very attentive to make it accessible, truly accessible to people.
I think more than just accessible, it's authentic. That's what I found when a few of us from Aphasia Victoria had a look at interactability, I guess 12 months ago or something like that. Yeah, it was just the authenticity of it, the examples, the video examples, the stories. You mentioned how impactful these stories are. It's because they're true stories, right?
Exactly.
I think that really shone through.
Yeah, and that's been an important part. We actually made a lot of effort to ensure that was going to ring true for people and not alienate people in that way. So, and that's why we do believe, maybe this is a great opportunity, interactability, for people who have had a brain injury to take time to understand what's happened to them. With such a fast-paced environment. So yes, thank you. We haven't got more questions there, but I wanted to ask Petra for the client. So if we go back to conversability, so again, that's the one that is the longer program that's delivered by a speech pathologist with this tool. For the clients you worked with, Petra, what stood out as their favourite part of using conversability?
I think similarly to how we were just talking then, those videos, we've got videos like that throughout conversability as well. That opportunity to work together, sit down, spend time, gather an understanding of each other and the challenges that both conversation partners go through when they try to communicate with each other. I think they found that really valuable, doing that in their own time, and then to be able to come to the session with already some thoughts of their own that they can talk through collaboratively with their speech pathologist and then put those into practice.
Great, that's great. And so then other program that you heard about was the sociability program. So a little bit different, really trying to enable people to have positive and safe opportunities for social connection. Such an important part. If we just avoid social media, we don't help people necessarily engage in the world, and most of us tend to use it to a degree. So I wanted to know, Liz, from your point of view, what would be the next steps you'd suggest for someone after they complete sociability? It's available, isn't it? What could they do next?
I think probably one of the big things throughout the social ability program is really encouraging people to find positive people to connect with in social media. And that could be finding someone that can support them in using it so that they're enjoying their conversations online just as much as we hope they are enjoying conversations in the real world. But some people don't necessarily have someone in their immediate vicinity that is someone that they would consider a safe person or a positive person to practice with. And so that was the whole concept of why we started these Facebook groups, so that it was a supportive environment, kind of a stepping stone for people who may not feel confident or maybe a bit worried, or to also help those around them who might be the ones that are worried about them using social media. So it provides it's a real world platform in that it is an actual social media platform, but it's held within a closed group. So it provides a bit of safety and security. And so we, although we ran those 3 groups over last year and this year, we've actually just in the last 2 weeks combined those 3 groups. So we have like a big social ability Facebook group now, so that people can continue chatting amongst themselves. And as part of that process, we have our awesome people who moderate alongside us with brain injury, and realistically they lead the group, and the conversations are much better for it, because like with the videos and interactability, as you say, it's authentic because it's real, it's based on life and what's happening, and it's coming from people who have a brain injury, not someone who just learnt about it at uni and clinical experience. So we have that as an option, so people can get in touch with us if they'd like to consider joining a group.
Okay, so people can do the program now just for their information, and if they want to contact you, they can extend that into sort of safe practice and safe connections with a specific group by contacting you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, great, thanks. I was also wondering, Rachel, you've done so much work on this whole suite of tools. What impact do you hope that the Social Brain Toolkit will have for people with a brain injury? You know, this is for them, isn't it? This is to improve outcomes and have, you know, a better life. So what are you hoping from this?
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess one of the hopes is that more people with a brain injury will have access to some support with their communication. That, you know, we know that there is a gap, I suppose, after people are discharged from hospital, they may get a little bit of rehabilitation, but it can be difficult for people to know what to do after that perhaps period comes to an end. So I guess our hope would be that these resources do provide something that people can access over the long term or can dip into at different stages when it's relevant to them, as you know, at relevant points during their ongoing recovery. And I guess the big picture is that we're hoping that these tools at different levels will provide people with brain injury with more positive connections, whether that's positive connections when they're interacting on social media, positive connections with their key communication partners if they've done conversability, or more positive connections with their broader networks, perhaps through interactability, really upskilling the people around them. And so I guess the big picture is more enjoyable interactions on a daily basis for people with a brain injury, leading to better quality of life. I mean, I guess that was what the iCare funding was directed to, for better quality of life for people with brain injury. So that's really the end goal of all of these different resources that we've developed.
Okay, thank you. Yes. And so I think that that's really important for us. So we're really looking at improving connections and communications, whether or not they're online or with people that are important to us as well. Melissa, hang on, I'll just have a look here. So it's a great amount of co-design and input by the research collaborators we have with ABI. Sam saying, were people with ABI also involved in the tech prototyping phase? Or was it the early conceptualisation and then the pilot testing phases? Well, this is great, Sam. Thanks for that really timely segue, because I might actually just hand over to Melissa. We've had varying stages right from the back of TBI Express when we originally did the original program, where we had some input, but we've had more input at the moment. Both Petra and Melissa have actually both been involved in that. But Melissa's turn is probably now, so I'll hand over to you, Melissa.
Like credit to Leanne, who sort of led the team way back in 2019, even in the sort of grant funding application with iCare, who have supported this project. There were stakeholders involved in that stage. So I guess you could call that the conceptualization of the project, which was 2019 was a long time ago now. But so over the years, we've had lots of different kinds of involvement since then at different stages and at each stage of the project's development. So they're at the conceptualization stage. And then Petra's also done really beautiful work getting input of people with brain injury into conversibility. And then I've also gotten input for interactability, and Liz has also done really beautiful work on obtaining input for social ability as well. And then that has actually directly fed into the design of all the interventions. And then it's continued in what I guess is more of an iterative data collection process in evaluating and implementing it as well. So the feedback that we received from the first users then immediately got fed back into interactability and social ability and our conversibility pilot as well. And I think I mentioned in the chat too, we also got to even co-author some of that research with members of the audience who are here today, as well as really fantastic contributions from clinicians, people with brain injury, families and friends who generously gave us the time to help us implement it as well. So we're really grateful to everyone who's been a part of this project. It's definitely it takes a village to pull off and a lot of time, but hopefully we think the results were well worth it.
Yeah, Sam, it's a great question. I went back over time and constructed a PowerPoint right from the beginning of this whole process of TBI Express through to TBI Connect through to now, trying to really isolate what were the contributions of all of our partners, interdisciplinary as well as people with a brain injury. And we've really developed it over time with different varying degrees of support. But I'd have to say that the content, the nature of how it's presented and how the tech is used in it have all had input. But not only that, Melissa's work was probably most important in saying, if we have to implement this with people and get it out there, what are the really key elements of this, considering it's a technology that we will have to use? So that was really critical as well for people to say, well, it has to have a good value proposition. It has to be worth it. So down to you need to increase your font size. So all different aspects have been actually, incorporated. That doesn't mean we can't continue to do more, and more feedback we get, we will respond to. We sometimes have to get grants to do that, but we definitely are trying to maintain that. Yeah, and we do have some serious authors here who actually have also got publications now as part of that. Yeah. So I'm just having a look. Colin, you've said, has there been any training or highlighting of the potential dangers, scammers, phishers, smishers of the participants of social media? Colin, this is a really important thing generally, isn't it? It's a big challenge. We know from the federal government that people lose an enormous amount of money each year, as well as heartache and stress and embarrassment. And these are really important. And so Liz has just sort of said that there are components of eSafety in each of the 4 modules. If you haven't read that comment, to highlight those risks and dangers, and links to other sources like the Safety Commissioner and the Cyber Ability Program, so that we can have people knowing where else they can go beyond our training program to do that. So I think it's really important. I know that loved ones are really concerned about this, and it's a really hard balance to be worried about that, but also then restrict people from using it. So our best bet is to make people use it more cleverly, and that way we can, try and, have successful communications and connections, but more safe ones. It is a really big issue. I was looking at the newspaper article the other day, Colin, and I think the numbers were well into their millions of the amount of people that some people, had lost, the money that's been lost on this. So it is really critical, and it's really important that Lissa's work has done that. Just before we go and wrap up, Melissa wants to have a little bit more to say about some of the implementation aspects we do, because we make a lot of knowledge in research, but how come some of it doesn't get to clinical practice? There's lots of different reasons. And so we're really being very, very aware that we can't just make this stuff and dump and run. We actually have to work out how can it actually really be used in practice. That's important. It's called implementation science, the science of getting stuff into practice. Melissa, did you want to say something more about that?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the journey that we've had. The very first meeting when sort of we on the Call the Team met, Leanne said something that I'll never forget. She said, "The world is ready for this." And I've had the lucky privilege of collecting the data that has really let us see how the world has started using these interventions. And it's been really amazing to see sort of some of the unexpected ways it's really taken off. So, for example, it's now part of the curriculum training of students in social work and speech pathology degrees in the United States, in Australia. And it's also been used by people with brain injury as a way to sort of validate their experiences after brain injury. Those authentic videos that we saw that were part of interactability, which was originally to train family and friends and support workers, really became a source of validation for people with brain injury themselves about what they'd been through, even years after. And one of the incredible things was it got distributed through Music Therapists Australia's national newsletter as a way to improve communication of music therapists with people with brain injury. And they really responded to that need. And people, so speech pathologists and therapists, as you saw in the feedback, told us there was such a need for this in our profession as a resource, and that it's really filled a gap that hasn't been filled before. So I think it really just, spoke to Leanne's comment that the world was ready for this, and now that it's out there, they're really taking with it and running with it in a lot of different ways.
Yes, and Sam's just highlighted that, that's a great achievement to get it into speech pathology syllabuses. I think interactability being that 2-hour amount is a really great opportunity. It's a lot harder to, engage and train people in conversability. That would take more time, but interactability is ripe for, that kind of smaller chunk, an introduction into those things. And so the implementation is more likely to happen if we've made different options available. And that's been really, really positive. And there's more to do yet. We can still go wider. Matthew had a question, and that question was really around, does conversability replicate the themes and concepts that TBI Express and TBI Connect covers? And for those of you who don't know, they were the original versions before conversability. what are the key similarities and differences between this new resource and TBI Express and Connect. So I might just share my screen this time for a second, Rachel, because if you're able to just enable that. And this has actually come from Melissa's work with one of her summary slides, but I think it could be helpful, Matthew, for you to see it visually. So what we've got here is, you can see up the top, we've got TBI Express, and that's what that one looks like. It's the red one if you have it in your materials room. TBI Connect, the blue one, Conversability, and just for comparison, Interactability. So one of the main actual differences is the number of clinician hours that are involved in delivering these programs. TBI Express was 35, and you might be going, oh my goodness. But we had to really make sure that complex change in the ability of how you talk, it's a skill. We don't actually just hand out a 2-page handout. So people needed lots of time. And we had also groups as well as one-to-one therapy. And you had to do a bit of homework each week, maybe 5 to 10. And we didn't have any technology. We just came to a room and everyone had to be in the same city or whatever, and we did it together. TBI Connect came along and we thought we need to do something where people can do it not in the same room. And Rachel developed something that took 15 clinician hours and about 2.5 hours of self-directed work for the people with brain injury and their partners. And it was sort of in person, or it could be done by video calls. And we were using Skype at the time. That just goes to show you how we progressed. Now, Conversability, Matthew, now is 10 hours of clinician-directed time because we've got more interactive, interesting and engaged material that people can work with outside of that time, so that speech pathologists can use their more precious time actively helping in those conversations. And that's video calls and the online course. And it's a bespoke thing. We haven't just chucked Zoom up. We've built a whole platform for it to happen. And that's with Changineers, who are experts in online educational design. And then, of course, we just heard recently about the interactability. And of course, that isn't any clinician-directed hours because it's a 2-hour course for the people with brain injury or carers or paid carers who do that. And it's an off-the-shelf program. So I'm hoping, Matthew, that answers your question. And for everyone else here, you get to see a bit of the comparison. Essentially, though, the content is in essence the same because it's the evidence base that we want to make sure everyone's getting. But it's just probably more nicely delivered. And I think that is really important. Yeah. 1 hour per module, Jared, yeah. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, if there's any other questions too, I'm very happy to ask them, and I'll just stop sharing the screen now, but it just gives you an idea. But essentially the content is, we've tried to make it and made sure that it is delivering the same important ingredients, but maybe with just sort of a more modern approach to that. You can share again now, Rachel, if you like. So if there isn't any other questions, I might just sort of ask a question for some of the presenters. Petra, you actually were one of the people who delivered as a clinician Conversability, so the one that is for the clinician to provide to the people with brain injury and their carers or their family. What was challenging about learning to use this new platform? It's new, it's not anywhere else. And what features did you find most useful?
In terms of the challenges, I don't think it was any more challenging than getting used to any other new platforms and learning to navigate, where things were. I found it relatively easy to sort of start to get used to. I also found, the fact that we had the essentially session plans ready to go, resources ready to go, everything was really accessible and really easy to share in the moment. So it really cut down on preparation time. I think when we were doing it in the early, very early days, maybe there were certain little glitches and things, but we worked with change engineers, and gave immediate feedback where those were rectified. So by the end of the program, I couldn't really think of any particular issues that were still coming up. Features that I really liked was the ability to give time-stamped feedback. So when we would go back and look over recorded conversations, the clients would be able, to pick up and talk about particular moments where, they asked a really good question, or they gave the other person time to speak. And it was really clear for them, where they were able to use those skills and strategies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then. Natalie, James, you just sort of sent me a message, and I know you might have want the whole group to hear. Can you just give them your experience, because you had a go, didn't you? You were actually using Conversability, and you have some ideas about the amount of time that it can take to actually just be preparing. And while you're thinking about that, we actually have thought about the prep hours, because we have been thinking about how do you get funding as clinicians. For those of you that are clinicians, how do you get funding from places like the NDIS? How many hours should you put in for? So we have actually considered some of that. But Natalie, would you tell the
I was just going to comment with that idea that each session there's 10 sessions and they're each 1 hour. If your clients are recording conversations and to hear and direct the session, you need to listen to their conversations. So I think you have to allow some time before the session, or at least 15 minutes. Some clients have shorter conversations and some have longer, but on average, I would say that you need at least 15 minutes before the session to look at the conversations and be planned and ready. So if you're putting a funding request in, you would need over 10 sessions, that adds up. So you would need to be asking for an additional couple of hours on the 10.
Yes, we went through and had a look at that, and really we're thinking about that. We've consulted with a speech pathologist who has a lot of expertise in the NDIS to look at how we're going to help clinicians get funding. And I think that's a really important point. For some of them, it could also be, in relation to just thinking about making sure that they've had a chance to get used to the program in general themselves as a one-off first training, as well as the time over time that, with each client that you have to spend as well. But we're hoping that once you have done it a few times, you manage to get used to some of the aspects of how you could work with it. Yeah. Okay, then. Just checking the chat if there's any other questions. If not, I was going to sort of talk more. It's one of the questions that we had there. And Rachel, I don't know if you want to say anything more about the relationship between Conversability, TBI Connect and Express, and which one to choose. So I've kind of given a bit of an overview back to that, but what do you think about choosing them?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because really I would say each of those programs as sort of playing a different role in service delivery. So thinking back to TBI Express, for those of you who may not be as familiar with that, that was a group-based program. So we were working with the person with brain injury and their communication partner in a group format, as well as some individual sessions alongside that. And so if you're in a clinical context when you can run groups, I think that's a great resource, because we know the benefits of group service delivery for providing that support within that group dynamic, for providing those natural opportunities to practice communication skills as well. So I think TBI Express is great for that purpose. Then moving on from that, we built on TBI Express to adapt to develop TBI Connect, which used, as Emma said, the same principles, but TBI Connect was designed for delivery to individual diets, so just directly working with the person with brain injury and their communication partner. And I'd say TBI Connect is quite an adaptable resource, that it can be delivered via telehealth using any platform you like, because we've provided you with PowerPoints for screen sharing, so it could be done. Although we did it over Skype back 5 years ago when Skype was the thing to use, it can easily be used over Zoom or other telehealth platforms that you have available to you, as well as being quite suitable to deliver in person as well to individual diets. And I guess then with Conversibility, we've continued to build on that, but it's really what we've done with Conversibility is develop an online learning environment in a sense, and really built, drawn on new technology in digital health, which clinicians might draw on to supplement or to enhance what happens in a clinical session, so that, as Petra showed you, you have extra tools available to you to provide feedback on conversations, to ask people to do some structured self-guided learning outside the session. So that might be a really beneficial approach if you're wanting to experiment with those different sorts of service delivery, and particularly for families who are wanting to engage in a service in that way. So yeah, I guess that's some general thoughts on how the different programs are related and what you might choose in different situations.
Thanks, Rachel. I hope everyone, that gives you a sense of those programs. Obviously, TBI Express, if you want group stuff, already has package stuff so that you can run a group, and that's one of its advantages too. So basically, I was thinking now, we have had a question. Rebecca G, you said, I work in an acute hospital setting, and you was wondering what you thought about, when an appropriate time would be to start something like Conversibility in a patient's journey. I was going to throw to Melissa in a sec about some information, but she did get different perspectives from clients. So I might let you say what you think, and then any other team members can add to that.
Yeah, so some of the people with brain injury told us that they had really wished that in that gap between discharge from hospital and starting rehab, they had access to something like this for more self-directed or even just, I guess, private therapy support like Conversibility. So they knew that they could make some of their earliest gains, in this initial period after their injury, rather than waiting, say, 5 or 10 years. And so they were really raring to go, but there was simply no services available. And so what really excited them about the Social Brain Toolkit was this potential to keep working on the skills that they wanted to improve on after their injury in that discharge to rehab period.
Mm-hmm.
And also another interesting time point experience from the other end of the scale was that we still found that for many of our Conversibility participants, they had suffered decades without receiving any communication partner training, and they still reached the point where they described Conversibility as life-changing for them. So even if that was, really, 2 or 3 decades later, they still received a benefit from the intervention. So that was really rewarding, I think, to see as well. But then for communication partners, some people with brain injury said that their communication partners had sort of moved on in terms of their coping and reflecting on this aspect of the impact of brain injury as well. So there's a variety of different experiences and journeys about it, but those were 2 that really stood out in people's
And I think for you, Rebecca, a lot of the people that were involved in these studies were people who were beyond the actual acute inpatient stage. And so that is something we probably have to acknowledge, that in that sense, that doesn't mean that we can't tailor it, we can't think about how it could be used, but what we have done is mainly with people who are post-hospital discharge. Now, I've done some research in early stage inpatient communication partner training, and we used simpler forms of the similar kind of things here. And it might be that interactability, being a shorter program, might be great for an introduction for family members or even the person with brain injury, depending on how their thinking and their ability to attend to something like that is going, on their insight. And so that might be something that can be a primer, something that people can see so they can have some empowerment to know what they can do to help recovery, but not take up as much focus time. And that could be something that you could say, once you're discharged and you're in a better place, we can now help you practice some of these things as well. Or you could get an idea from what's in these programs and say, what's my bang for buck? What's the 2 or 1 things from these principles that this communication partner really needs right now? And so I think that's just my personal opinion, Rebecca, and I don't know if that's helpful or not. And if any of the other team members have anything to say, I'm happy to do that.
Sorry, Emma, can I just corroborate what you were saying there? A lot of the families of people with brain injury told us that they were really looking for hope in that period and were really, I think, hoping for something like this, even self-directed for themselves. So, for example, interactability to help equip them while they were looking for direction and hope to support the recovery of the person they loved. And I think for you as someone in an acute setting, what most people said that they'd wished for is they really wanted a clinician at that stage to help at least let them know that this resource existed, and that they really trust you at this stage, and would really like to at least have, for example, a link or a flyer about it, so that they could access it when they're ready, whenever that may be for that individual journey.
Yeah, and I think Natalie has said, I wonder about the use of these programs at different times in a person's journey. And I think, and I've just sort of replied that I think, clinicians have, and so do, when you talk to communication partners and people with brain injury themselves, they're often able to say the kind of things that they need, and it might be something little for the moment or a lot. And so as clinicians, you can use your expertise once you get to know these programs a bit more and use them flexibly as a suite of tools, so that you can actually, have more than just one program. You've got two different types of things in your toolkit. So I think that's great. Carrie, you've said that it's fantastic. Thanks, Gary. Nice to see you again. I can see interactability being so beneficial for the teachers of my adolescent clients with brain injury. That's a great potential, use for something like interactability, because they can do it in their own time, at their own pace as well, like Rachel said. I just wanted to move on before so that we finish on time. We're nearly done, but just to make sure that we just covered off also thinking about the questions list in relation to sociability. We know that people with brain injury can be vulnerable and that people want to protect people from brain injury from the difficulties of social media, but social media has so much to offer in terms of connection. So what surprised you what sort of clients would you suggest would be good candidates for sociability?
My obvious answer, although I am very biased, is any person with a brain injury that wants to use social media. I think, it needs to be considered on an individual basis like we would any other program, certainly because it's typically set up to be a self-directed program. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that someone with a brain injury does this whilst in an acute setting by themselves. I think that would be, quite hard to do. However, it's set up so that it can be done with others supporting them. And so it could be used in inpatient rehab with the support of a family member or with the support of a clinician to help them go through parts of the program if doing the whole program isn't viable at that time. It also could be recommended to clients who are in the community and maybe on a waiting list who can't access services, but that are using social media, because it gives them some tools to think about using social media safely, but also prompts them to think about who in their immediate circles might be able to support them and be like a social media buddy or companion or communication partner, whatever term you want to use. So I think, there's potential for people at any time of their recovery after their brain injury. It just depends on how they use the program.
Mm-hmm. Great, Liz. And we've just finally had a little bit more of a comment from Inbal. Well done on this important work. Thank you for your hard work in sharing the resources. You'll be using interactability and suggesting it for family members of clients who may find it useful to understand some of the cognitive communication challenges post-brain injury. Yes, and they're not concrete. They're kind of things that we take for granted in our socialisation and social interaction. And Carrie said, what does the modulated Facebook group still exist, or what moderated, I think, or was this for the purposes of the study only, Liz?
Yeah, so it actually still does exist. So the 3 groups have actually just in the last week or two been amalgamated into one large combined group. And so we actually had our first Zoom morning tea this morning, which was quite fun. So we're going to be hosting these little catch-ups via Zoom probably once a month or so to start with, so that the people in the groups can still connect and catch up and have that almost face-to-face interaction. And it seems to help keep the conversations flowing within the group. We will be running more groups down the track, and the idea is probably that we will run small groups for new people who will then move into the bigger combined group once they feel a bit more confident.
So when we're ready to open it up for more groups, Liz, we'll make sure that everyone.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just finally to finish off, I know we've got time, we're a little bit over time. Petra's comment there is really important, interactability, especially being 2 hours. Many of us are educators, would be something that's really effective for students, health students, or students from different disciplines. I'm looking at using it with orthoptists who work with vision. So that's another thing, another way you can think about it. Or if you're a clinical educator on placements and you want people to revise the information. So that's another great use. And thanks, Liz, for your comments. We really appreciate everything you've done. And of course, your students have been finding it really helpful already for their placements, which is fantastic. It's just what we want to hear. I just wanted to end quickly. I just get another message from Rosie, who's on the call. She said it's been fantastic. Thank you again for doing this, and thank you to everyone. Rosie is an outstanding consumer advocate. She has been involved in this project, been on the paper, Melissa, and also comes and gives an extraordinary guest lecture to my students. And has been critical in the process as well. So thanks, Rosemary, and thanks for coming along. Okay. So I'll just hand over to Professor Leanne Torr just for the final words of thanks, and then we'll be finished.
Well, what an amazing session that has been. It's just such a fabulous journey I think we've all been on together, and I think we're all equally delighted and excited to be able to finally share this resource with all of you, and we hope you share it with others. We're just thrilled, really, with how it's looking. It's been this is the formal launch, but even before the launch, people have started using it. So we think this is going to be a very popular and well-used resource, and it's been just a fabulous thing that's come together since 2019. And I would like to once again acknowledge iCare for the generous funding from the Quality of Life Investment Program. We could not have done it without them. And really thanks to everybody in the team. It has been a huge team that has contributed to this. We've had Brain Injury Australia, we've had Changineers, we've had University of Sydney, University of Technology, and it really has, as Melissa said, it's taken a village to build this, and I think the world is ready for this. So we're happy to let it fly and be free, and for people to use these resources and hopefully improve their quality of life and improve their conversations and relationships. That's our goal. If we do that, that we'll be very happy. So thanks very much for attending today. There's been lots of links put out, and we've been on Twitter a bit as well. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to Rachel Reedake for her amazing program managership of this project. We look forward to hearing from you. So please contact us and let us know how you're going with these resources. And I think we will leave it there. So thank you very much.